a hidden horsepower episode on location at the Engine Performance Expo. This one I'm very excited about. Pro Stock, as you know, and you as well, with your relationship with Matt Hartford and Total Seal after one of their best year ever. Actually, we were just trying to figure out. Mike Valerio, Jack of all trades, says he. Pro Stock Pioneer says me. Welcome to Hidden Horsepower.
Thank you.
So your career has spanned many decades. Talked about doing a lot of work in the early days with the OEs, up until this past year where you helped Mark Powick get his first Wally in many years in the NHRA Factory Stock Showdown. What a career you have had.
Yep, it's been a long career. It's been great.
Let's go to the beginning. How did you get into this?
I had a friend in high school who had an older brother and older friends. They had a little hot rod shop, so we would hang around the hot rod shop. So that's where I first got interested in it, back in the 60s. And I started getting little jobs for nothing, like drilling holes in beam axles of 48 Fords, you know, hardened drills, burning up drills. And
jobs no one else wanted to do.
Right. Give that kid over there, he wants to hang around here. Charge him rent, too. So I had to pay $15 a month, my rent. But anyway, I started in liking cars then and worked at a Chevy dealer and living on a farm and just got it very, very interested in it. And from those older gentlemen that were 2-3 years older than me helped me take an interest in it. It's been a passion my whole life. I can say that I've only had one job out of high school, and I went into this building cars and
took over.
Followed your passion.
Yeah.
That was the bug. Yeah. What was your first car?
First actual race car.
Yeah.
65 Chevelle. That was the first car. And second car was a 67 Camaro. I worked at a Chevy dealer, bought it brand new. Big block when it came out halfway through the year. High horsepower. 409 or 396 with a 4-speed. And a month later, I got a call from the insurance agent. He says, "Hey, you don't have insurance on this anymore. They came with this rule of horsepower to weight." And I said, "What am I going to do? I got this brand new car, 300 miles." So I took the engine out of it, and I blueprinted it back in those days, put it back in, and I ran into Ron Hutter, who had a dyno shop.
Okay.
So we backed that Camaro on the dyno, and we ran on it, and Ron says, "Well, this thing's got some pretty good snot. I think we can get some more out of it." So we became friends. And that particular car I bought at the dealership, we turned it into an A-modified production. I got to give Ron Hutter all the credit for getting me involved in the NHRA type racing, because he had a C-stock Pontiac Ventura, you know. But anyway,
so are you from that area?
Yes, I live one town away from Ron.
Okay.
So I took that Camaro over to Ron's, where he worked at a Chevy dealer. He had an engine chassis dyno in there, and so we got to talking. I said, "Ron, maybe we ought to just build this thing up." And he says, "Oh, okay." So he started building engines. This is when he first started. We'd take the block, the speed equipment in Cleveland, and the crank would go somewhere, and we'd assemble it until he got his own shop.
So you were right there with Ron at the very beginning.
Yeah, right in the beginning.
So really it's the insurance guy that got you into racing.
Yeah, that's right.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah, the insurance guy got me in it, and one of them kept me in it because I was going out and buying these stripped out, they call them stripped out high performance cars back in the 60s. The average life expectancy of a big block Chevy or a high performance car on the streets of Cleveland was about 30 days. So
maybe shorter in the wintertime?
Yeah. So we had this insurance adjuster, and we had a Chrysler guy and we had a Ford guy, and I was a GM guy. So every time one of these come up, we'd bid against one another. Of course, you know, the juggle of bidding. I got all the Camaros. I had Z28s lined up, Chevelles. I had a whole yard full of them. So I started selling parts off of those cars to help the racing program. I sold parts to the local junkyards until they were able to buy them through the salvage bowl, which is now a salvage bowl. So that canned heat Camaro that we built in '69, that was one of those insurance cars that we got.
Whoa, okay,
So
hey, wait, time out. Right. So you're saying canned heat, like one of the famous race cars in NHRA history, that was you and Ron building that car out of basically junk parts.
Yeah. We went
An insurance car.
an insurance strip-out car. Yeah.
Insurance strip-out
Yeah.
car.
We'd roll her into the shop and tear her down. We could take one of those things apart in about 15, 20 minutes and still know every nut and bolt in one of them things. There ain't very many. The whole front end comes off. And then we'd start chiseling the body deadener out and to lighten it up. And down the road there's a place called Diamond Alkali. One of our buddies worked there, and they had an acid tank in there. So if we're going to build this car, it's going to be, the best it could be. Acid dip the doors, acid dip the fenders, and everything. Of course, I don't know if it was
Where did you
shady
get the idea to
rules.
do
Well,
that?
so let's pause there because the story was, hey, Mike's going to be on Hidden Horsepower. There were a couple of different notes, and I reached out to Michael Heiner, who's the crew chief of the Get Biofuel car. He's from Ohio. A lot of great racers from Ohio. Acid dipping. Ask him about acid dipping. One of the first to do this. How did that come about? It's kind of out of the box thinker.
Yeah. So we thought to lighten this stuff up, we were going to go up to this shop up the road at 3 o'clock in the morning and use their acid tank. So we lightened the doors and lightened everything we put in there. We left it in there and cooked it. So then the following year I was building a 70.5 Camaro, and we were going to the Winter Nationals, the first Pro Stock Winter National, 1970. We had the 70.5 Camaro on the trailer going to Aerochem in California, which is a chemical milling aircraft plant. So we got the body cleaned. Some Mexicans stripped all the paint off it. We took it over. We got it stripped. We got it back. And somebody in Akron had this big tank, a big acid tank, but they were having trouble. They were ruining stuff, and they built Hunter Miller's first car, and they had trouble anyway. I ended up buying that tank from them, and I put it in there. And started building Vegas, acid dip Vegas. There was an article in Carcraft magazine, and General Motors engineers saw it, and it was right at the time they were trying to take weight off of automobiles for better gas mileage. So they says, maybe we can use this guy. So they called me up and said, hey, we want you to acid dip some Camaros for us. I said, oh, okay.
GM,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I started doing those bodies for them. They called it an A-pillar crush test. It had to meet a certain, it was way overboard, so they could go farther with it. So they were going to buy this real thin Campbell's soup tin and build one of these cars, and it was running millions of dollars. So they called me up, and they saw this article. I built a Camaro that weighed 1,800 pounds. So that's what started it. They started bringing them in, and then they produced them. And the last one I did, we acid dipped or chemical milled every panel in that whole car. They sent it to Cincinnati and had it built. They built the whole car and then crush tested it. So that's how I got into that. But I think the real stories you're looking for is the time I fell in the acid tank.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Obviously you survived.
Do you have superpowers?
Yeah, I have survived.
Like in all the movies, if you fall in the acid tank, you come out
You're
with
done.
superpowers. Or you're
yeah.
diabolical.
Yeah, right. I was yellow.
See? There you go.
Yeah. So I just recently started doing some work for Chrysler. I had to build a bigger rack to all those big cars and everything. I had an electric motor, an electric lift on a chain, and it was, I was like in my 20s. I wasn't rocket science to worry about that electric motor up above that acid. So I had Ronnie Sox's car in there. It was about the third car I did for Chrysler. Had Ronnie Sox's car in there. I go over to the trolley to pull it up, and I go, and I look up, and it's not moving, and it's sparking. So I had one of my helpers, I says, run down the shop and get that come-along up here so I can get that thing out of here. They only have to stay in there 20 minutes or so. They're done. So he brings it back, and I go up on the rack, and I hook it onto the rack, and I start standing out on this carrier, and I'm jacking this thing, jacking it up, and it's gotten up, and I'm looking for places to put my feet, and it's coming out, you know, looking down, and, you know, oh gosh, there's a big hole. Well, there's another one. And I slipped, and I fell in the tank off of that. But I got out, and I got right out, and my buddies ordered bringing this thing out, and I went over and I had all safety stuff, you know, you wear a suit, but the acid goes through it, goes underneath it. Sprayed myself off. I was okay. Went down to the office, and I called Larry Henry at Chrysler. And I said, Larry, got some bad news. I says, I just lost a duster, and I think it's in Sox's. He says, well, what's it look like? I says, did you ever see a turkey after Christmas? It looks like a Christmas turkey. It was just the A-pillars and just some of the inner structures. So they says, well, you better get up here to Hamtramck. We'll have you another one ready in a couple of days. But, you know, it was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning Wile E. Coyote after, you know, like a bomb's gone off or something.
Yeah, yeah. So
but you're obviously lucky to have escaped that.
Yeah, escaped a lot of things.
But in that era, though, and just thinking about the people who were around, you know, we're talking about Grumpy Jenkins, obviously the Bob Gliddens of the world, Sox and Martin, Mr. Four Speed, Roy Johnson, like the Pro Stock was popping at that time. It was, and still one of the big three categories in the National Hot Rod Association. It's morphed and changed over time, a lot of technology. But we say the word pioneer as in, it was a wide open field. You guys could do a lot of different things. What was that like to be able to have like this open playing field, to be creative and come up with different things, whether it be on the car, the chassis, under the hood?
Yeah. Well, it was right up our alley. You know, challenges are what we live and die for. So when we get one of these new cars, we'd first lighten it, and you know, it's just everything we did we have to make. And we would talk to different manufacturers, and they'd say, like a carburetor company would say, you can't put those carburetors on there sideways, it'll never work. And Ron Hutter says, Mr. Technology, it was going to work. So we would make stuff like that out, and we'd run our carburetors sideways. But you basically had to fix everything. One of Ron's famous sayings was, if it comes in a box, you got to make it right.
Yeah, I've heard him say it.
Yeah, you've heard him say it.
Yeah.
Probably some of your boxes at one time.
That's right. Everybody's, right?
Yeah,
it's everybody's. You know?
That's right, everybody's. Yep. So, you know, we would end up either highly modifying or building our own carburetor linkage, things that you just take for granted today. You couldn't buy cams that were, you know, buy a Chevy cam and TRW pistons, which we spent a lot of time developing pistons with them because they didn't, if they said they had 11.5 to 1 piston, it's probably a 10. So I remember in the wintertime I made a cup up for a piston so I could read the CCs, and Ron Hutter and I was out in my garage on a cold winter morning and figuring out they were wrong. We started welding on the domes of the pistons, and that's where you see that famous picture of Grumpy Jenkins looking at the dome of the piston, because we were all kind of late night talkers, you know, and we redesigned the piston, and then that time TRW went into the piston business. They were an OEM supplier at the time.
So you were taking an OEM piston and welding it
to get the dome.
Dude, that's just cool.
Yeah, and grinding it the way the flame propagation and things like that. We did a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's how the early years were, because Jan's pistons, fuel pistons, wouldn't fit in a 427 Chevy big block. So we had to make it right down to the piston. Of course, we were limited to what we could use. There was not a lot of aftermarket. There was nothing like it is today. So we were, all of us were pioneers in that way. Yep.
And it's just incredible to think. Yeah, I know it from the NASCAR side. I got to spoke to Watto Wilson recently, and they were at home in Moody.
Yeah.
They were building all of these engines, but they were getting engines from Ford. So those engines were built at Ford.
Yeah, Ford.
Shipped down, then they took them out of the crate and they would blueprint them, so they would go through everything. And you know, obviously that blueprinting process was trying to make everything as accurate as they wanted it to be. And obviously there were some little tricks here and there in terms of assembly, fit and fitment type stuff.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying is obviously what you guys were doing in drag racing at that same era was you did all that, plus you were really kind of going outside the box and thinking, okay, well,
there wasn't even a box, though.
You're right.
There wasn't even a box. Right. There was just nothing. There was just open space, and they were
like
figuring it out.
It'd be better if I could have this. I think it would be better. Let's make it and see if it actually goes better.
It's a continuous problem solving, basically. You know, you got to know the problem and you got to solve it. And with racing, you get one problem solved and another one comes up.
Yeah.
You know, that's just like the situation I have going on right now with Mark's car, because they took 50 pounds off the car, and I had that car perfectly balanced. I mean, you can read the track, and we knew what to do with it, perfectly balanced. Well, that 50 pounds has upset the car. It's taken me 3 months to get the balance back to that car.
Well, let's go a little...
Those cars are so sensitive.
Let's go a little deeper. NHRA as a category, flex jet, factory stock showdown. These factory engines, but are limited and regulated. In, you know, they're over like 35, 50, 3,600 pounds now. Mark Powick, former pro stock racer, he's been involved for a while, but got his first win this year, and it was a big deal. But in what I would call mine shaft amazing conditions, ripped off the first 750 anything, and that alerted the rules makers, and they walloped you guys.
Yeah.
And you know, some would say too much. I'm not giving my opinion, but that caused you guys a great challenge, because now you had to go back to work. So let's just start at how meaningful was it to be a part of that, to bring, you know, Cowboy back to the winner's circle? It was a tremendous victory. I know he and his family had been working on that for a long time, and you helped deliver it.
Yeah, known Mark a long time. Known him since he had to have a pillow to drive his car. So he calls me up and he says, what are you doing? I said, I don't know, I'm retired for the 4th time. And he says, well, how about number 5? He says, I got a job that I want you to look at. I want you to help me. I says, it better be a good challenge, because I ain't riding my ass all over this country fixing race cars again. So he told me 3,600, 9-inch tire, 1,400 horsepower. I says, hey, I'm on. Limited. You know, you've got to really understand the dynamics of the car. And so I went on with that. And he has Dave Barton as an engine builder. And Dave and I hit it off. We're very similar in our thought processes. And so we began to hit it off pretty good. So now we're taking on this NHR challenge. And that's what I like. I mean, I've been around NHRA my whole life, and when you do good, you get knocked. And you got to come back, and and it makes you tougher. So, you know, I'm one of them kind of guys. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, I'll figure this one out. So that's where we're at right now with Mark's car.
So at the start of last year, Mark was having great challenges just blowing the tires off at the end. Like he couldn't even get to the weight transfer point. I don't want you to tell us what the problem was, because someone else has got the problem, and maybe they need to go through that exercise. But you clearly solved the problem.
Yeah, between Dave and I, we solved the problem. But those cars are so sensitive, and
is that just because the tire is so small?
The tire's so small, and they have to stay stuck, a dead hook, and they have to roll without blowing off. So they have to leave the starting line with no power. Well, any race car has the biggest advantage in the first 60 feet. I don't care what we all know that. Yeah. So those cars were very, very slow. And if you have a bad 60, you're going to have a bad 360. But those cars are so powerful, they got a back end on them like crazy. So to get it to use the horsepower, I did a physics formula, and I figured out how fast that car should run, that weight, 0 coefficient of friction, because there basically isn't any tire spin like I'm used to in pro mod cars. But anyway, I came up with a number. We haven't hit it yet, but we've been very close. We went one time where I thought, well, we're getting closer, but I threw it out. because it was only one time. We have had the car running consistently below the 120, which has been a project for those Chrysler cars for a long time because they're a long wheelbase. And it takes a difficult car like that. It takes a couple of races and maybe half a season to figure out the personality of the car. Every car's got a different personality. Me being a car builder, building pro stock cars, if you have one welder doing this and another guy doing that, we finally figured out all the sequences, hundreds of welds to make that car torque the way we want it.
Okay.
It took 5 years, but anyway. So I learned at a very early age of dealing with these high horsepower cars, they all have a different personality. They all twist in a different way, and somebody's modified it, and it changed this and it changed that, and we got a degree different over here, and so it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, the chassis is a spring.
Yeah, the chassis is a spring, and shock technology they have today is amazing. And sometimes simple shocks work. It's just
it's like what combination works. But like you said, you knew that with that tire you couldn't accelerate it more than this, so you had to try to get as close to that without going over that. So you're not giving it up. It's like bracket racing.
Yeah, they're that touchy though. They're that touchy.
They're super sensitive.
Yeah, half a degree of time to blow the tire off it.
Which is great, though, for entertainment value, because we have these cars that, they're 3,600 pounds, and they're both blowing off the tires, and now the driver's got to figure out how to get to the end first in the end, because it's a drag race. And it's very exciting, and people love the class. We got Factory X coming as well. Does that interest you?
Oh, yeah. I'd love to get into that, and I'm doing some serious talking, trying to... But they're very expensive.
Come on, Powick, spend the money.
Yeah, I think we.
You got heavy hitters in that class.
Yeah, well,
that is not for
and more coming. It's very serious.
I've been through that deal with ADRL. I had a Pro Mod, ran on 10.5 tires. I've got a lot of experience at running 10.5 tires, so it's about the same horsepower of these cars. And those guys are struggling. I can't figure it out, but I know it's there. I would like to build one of those cars because I think we'd have an awful fast hot rod. It's just pulling it all together and running the car this year, and I'd like to have one right now to start working on, kind of build our own car.
It's been interesting to see how it's being received with all the rules of the engine, crankshaft centerline, engine's very far forward, it's in a stock location. It's interesting. There's no nothing to copy off of to really take a base setup from, is what everyone is telling me.
My only thought on that is they'd have a lot more of these cars coming out if they were to allow a fluid-driven transmission instead of the clutch.
Yeah.
You could put a Liberty behind a tie drive, a fluid drive. I think they're both about equal. Maybe the little disadvantage of the fluid drive, but they're making a lot of improvements on those.
But just to avoid resurfacing the clutch and all the associated
that's another, work. They want to keep the cost of it down. Now you got to have a clutch guy.
Right, you drive the cost up,
Everyone's excited for the Liberty, though. It's going to be it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you can have that Liberty with a fluid drive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if NHRA would allow that, I think that class would everybody be building cars. Haas would have 6 more than he has now. And
oh my gosh, I don't know if he wants that.
No, I know. None of them want them. That's another thing.
They're overwhelmed. But a good problem to have, and who knows what will happen down the road. So isn't it interesting that we just talked 2 stories. One, the very beginning pioneering moments of Pro Stock, and then the most absolute current category of NHRA drag racing, which is Factory Showdown and Factory X. And this guy is involved in both.
It's incredible. And you mentioned something, just as a kind of casual statement, that you and David Barton kind of hit it off and thought the same way.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really an important moment because from the chassis side, the engine side, they're not 2 separate theses. They have to.
I got to know when he's bringing the power in. I got to know, and he's got to know what I got on my mind. I'm putting more weight here. Well, why? And we get along great, and that's part of a championship team, is to have everybody do their job and give everybody a break.
It has to.
That's what we're trying to do this year.
And for those of you who are enjoying the Hidden Horsepower podcast feed, you can check out the David and Ray Barton episode in the feed, which we had them both on. Now I understand.
And there's a Ron Hutter one too.
Yes, I think David is stepping back from the driver's seat this year, is what he told me, and he's going to help with the customers and the clients. So you said the word championship. That's exciting.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
Yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle, but we're tough. I might be old when I'm tough.
He survived falling in an acid bath.
There's your second T-shirt quote there, Lake. Yeah. I might be old, but I'm tough.
Yeah. No, I can feel that, man.
Can we go back to some of the characters of the early days? And I don't know that you have a story ready to just pop up on us, but that's kind of part of Hidden Horsepower, in that you were in the middle of this golden era. Like, Grumpy Jenkins rolls out the first chassis car.
Yeah.
What about that? Like, when that, like, oh man, this thing is all chassis, all pipe, there's no factory, nothing in this thing. And a lot of people think that in that moment, NHRA should have sent them to the house, and that might have changed the direction of Pro Stock. What is your take on that moment?
Well, I was there when that happened. Well, they allowed it. No matter what, NHRA can do whatever it thinks can help. So they allowed it, and Ron Hutter went along with building his own style of that car. And by that time, he had his business going pretty good, and I had gone and formed competition engineering. But before that, I built some cars. And that was the deal. He lent me his blueprints to build my car, and I built my car, and of course, Friday come, I need money, somebody wanted to buy that car, it was gone. So I think I built 5 or 6 before I got my own. But
so competition engineering, that's the same company that Moroso had later, that people are probably familiar with seeing that logo, that name.
The decals, that's everywhere.
You.
Yeah.
You got your decals out everywhere, by the way. That was like marketing 101. Yeah. The logo was everywhere.
Yeah, I did the same thing with MVM carbon wheelie bars. They got them on some of the, well, I used to start at the bottom working with somebody, and I'd finally get to the Grumpy Jenkins deal, But anyway, this time the carbon wheelie bar deal was after Don Ness had started making them. They had a little failure with them. And I always wanted to do it. Even before he did it, I wanted to do it. And I've been working on it a little bit at a time.
What was the thought? Why carbon versus something else?
The material is very rigid. And you can make it flexible, but it's very rigid. Being a car builder and a car parts builder, you could see the old wheelie bars flexing. Mm-hmm. And even chromoly, where they would flex. So they always had to stagger the right side down to keep the car in balance. Mm-hmm. Carbon, you don't have to do that 1/16 of an inch. And I changed the design of how they're mounted to the car. I raised the upper strut a lot higher so the wheel had leverage on the rear end, where you just run a wheelie bar out of the bottom with a short stack on it. It doesn't have much control over it. When you put it up over that pinion and you're pushing on it, so that was one of the things it did. The other things that it did was cut down on a lot of tire shake. In fact, at Gainesville one year, they had Kevin Rivenbach's car. They were doing a close-up on the tire shake, and it had a carbon bar that was bending. But the wheel and the wheel housing are so much lighter, it's like a pendulum out there. Mm-hmm. And in all my slow-mo movies, I could see the rear end jumping, and then the wheel would answer it. And the wheel would shake, and the tire would answer it to shake back and forth.
With the chromoly?
Yeah, with chromoly, because they're heavy. Yeah. So with the carbon being lighter, it wasn't as much of a pendulum. So one of the first cars I used was Stevie Jackson. Stevie Jackson, he was drive-through tire shake king. So he started putting those on there. He says, man, those things are amazing. He says, I can feel them shaking, but I can drive right through it. to those steel bars, I'd have had to give up and lost the race.
Wow.
So there was a lot of different things. And then people use them now for wheel speed. They'll ride them, you know. They'll make the tires spin off them. They're that controllable. You can lift them up a couple hundred thousandths, gain 400 RPM.
Just by lifting the rear tires off to get that initial wheel speed up.
Yeah, the guys that really know how to use them, they won't chalk their tires because they don't want you to see how far out they ride them.
How cool is that, Joe?
Amazing. No, it is.
Because you're there every weekend. This is the world you live in.
He's got a lot of things to see.
It's annoying that there's just so much amazing stuff going on, and you can only absorb as much as you can absorb. Yeah. And I try to absorb as much as I can, but every run that goes down that racetrack, there's something exciting and interesting going on. All right, before we wrap up, you know, we have a question we normally ask during Hidden Horsepower, which is, we're all trying to motivate this next generation of racers, crew chiefs, chassis engineers, engine builders, machinists, and otherwise. And I like to think that there are some young people out there checking it out. What advice would you have for the next wave of people like yourself to hopefully come in and get ahead in this field?
Well, I think they have to have some mechanical abilities. They seem to be the ones that want to get into it. But going to the racetrack, talking to drag racers, and the best people in the world, we're all family, you know? And I think that's what I do. My job is to carry on, teach younger people than me, maybe people my own age, my knowledge to help this go on, the whole thing. What little knowledge I have of this whole great big thing, I'm giving it away. I'm working like with David, and I work with Chris Nelson for 6 years. What was that? 7 years at Chris Nelson.
I know Kyle Powick probably wants to know all the stuff you know too.
Yeah,
just throwing that out there.
I'm trying to teach Kyle too. Yeah.
Well, that's Mark's son, obviously. He's coming in and
trying to
doing a great job. Doing a great job.
Yeah.
Daughter Cass as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, the whole Pollock family is.
Ohio must have been a real hotbed. Just thinking about George Montgomery, obviously,
gassers,
but Larry Morgan and
Gasser City. You know,
a
lot of gassers. Pro stockers, a few, mostly gassers. I think we held from Virgil Cates A-Gas Super all the way down to the G's.
So is it Lima or Lima, Ohio?
Lima, I say.
Okay.
You say Lima?
We don't know.
Well, we just say
potato, potato.
Right.
So you're asking all the Ohio people.
I'm just asking.
Oh, Lima.
We're getting a poll.
Lima.
That's important, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lima.
Look at that. See, we get the answers here at the Engine Performance Expo on a special edition of Hidden Horsepower. Mike, thank you very much for joining us. So exciting, obviously, that you continue to enjoy this sport and be challenged by it. And thank you for sharing your story.